Hi there everybody. Before I start talking, I would like to just thank you for taking some time out of your evening to go ahead and click on the video and watch it all the way through until the end if you do. I wanted to make this video about my 1972 Dodge D200 pickup truck. I've owned the truck for a little over a year now, and I wanted to make this more so out of the purpose for just documentation and share with the public just a little bit about the vehicle and the different options that it came with, because it is a pretty rare truck. Not necessarily rare in terms of desirability, but pretty rare when it comes to how many of them were made for the 1972 model year, how many of them have the certain options that this one does, as well as just how many are probably even still left driving on the road today. So I've owned the truck for about a year now, and everything that I've done to the vehicle is done out of the respect to try to preserve as much of the originality as I can. Now I will get into some of the things that are not original to the truck, one of which being this white exterior paint job. I apologize if you can hear the sound of crickets behind me. It's summer and the bugs are out in full force. So again, my goal with this is to preserve it as well as restore it back to as close to factory as possible. I think the truck makes a good candidate for it, as you just do not see a whole lot of these really early third-gen D-series trucks. This one in particular being a 3/4 ton truck. It is a D200. And it has a 360 two-barrel, as well as the very rare new process 445 heavy-duty transmission with what is referred to as a granny gear, very low first gear. In the rear end, it is a Dana 60 with 456 gears. I don't think for 72 you could get anything higher than that. So a pretty torquey truck, especially using first gear. You're doing about 5 miles an hour before you have to shift. So I've owned the truck for about a year now. I bought it from a gentleman out of northwest part of where I live in AZ. And it was a father and son project, and the son primarily spent most of his time with it, and the father was helping him out. He got tied up elsewhere, the son moved on to other things, and the father was selling it on behalf of the son. So the truck isn't by any means perfect. There's still a long way to go in the process, and just really trying to find pieces and parts for this is very, very hard. A lot of what's out there in terms of aftermarket support is larger body panels and metal, because as far as I can see, the sheet metal stayed roughly the same, as well as the windows from 72 all the way up until 80. And maybe even the glass was the same after that, I'm not exactly sure. But being this is a 72, this was the first year for this body style. It was marketed heavily as the only all-new pickup for 1972, and some of the features that they offered, especially in the advertisements on TV as well as in the brochures finding around your local dealership, was that it was double wall construction all the way around. 72 was the first year for independent front suspension. It had a completely new interior as well as more space offered than, say, a Chevy or Ford or GMC at the time. And to that extent, it is very true. There's a lot more room in here, and they marketed it as somewhat of a passenger car feel, even though it was a pretty totalitarian, crude pickup truck used for work. So I'll get into the trim options that this came with, which makes it kind of a higher end truck when it was new. So I'll just start at the front of the truck, and I will just kind of walk through it and point out things as I see them. It's got the correct for 72 and 73 grille. A lot of the other ones that I've seen that label themselves as a 72, and I understand that they get beat up and dinged and dented, and they do not make reproductions of this, so they will put a 74 or 75 grille on it. This one has the correct grille. It also has the correct Dodge block lettering, which was available on these trucks from 72 until 76. If you know anything about the latter years, 77 and 78 saw that the Dodge logo was actually up in front of the grille. It was a part of the grille, it was not a separate hood letter. It returned again in 79, but it was all together and the font style was different. So move on to the side here. This is one of the options that the truck was ordered with. It happens to be a Camper 9000. I'm trying to get the shade away from the badge so you can see it. It's a Camper 9000, and it was one of 2 available towing packages that Dodge offered for 1972. The lower of the 2 being a Camper 7500. So with the 9000 and with both camper packages to a certain extent. This one has a rough tow capacity of around 4,600 pounds. You got increased cooling, heavy-duty alternator, battery, fuse box, and wiring harness. And I believe that this truck, even though I do not have any documentation telling me so, it appears that with the condition of the bed, that there's very little dings or dents in it, so it probably got preserved with that big camper shell in the back. Same thing with the mirrors as well. These are giant three-legged mirrors. Funny thing to note about them is that these are actually for a Ford. My guess is that Dodge was kind of scrambling, given that this was a brand new model year and a complete redesign from the 71. And they ended up sourcing out some other parts because it was a lot easier and cost-effective to do so. So these are for a Ford. These are called West Coast style mirrors, and I happened to find that out after looking for reproductions of them. So one of the things to note as well, I'll talk about in the bed, I sanded this down, and I'll talk about the paint. The truck was originally a color that was, I wouldn't say tritone, but it was two-tone. The cab top, outlined by the trim, was kind of an off-white, almost a cream color. The midsection was this very vibrant orange, and the same cream white was underneath the body line. It is an 8-foot bed, so it does have the insert for the toolbox. Correct me if I'm wrong, you can go to the comments and haggle me about it, but I believe that this was standard on swept line models with an 8-foot bed. It has the Dodge hubcaps, and these are an 8-lug given that it's a 3/4 ton truck, and there's that infamous older Dodge logo. That symbol is called the Frat Zog, if you didn't know. Now we come to the second trim option that this truck was ordered with, which is the Adventurer SE package. You had the Adventurer, the Custom, which was very base. You had the Adventurer Sport, and then this is the top of the line with the SE, which stood for Special Edition. And if you know anything about the Special Edition, you would know that I'm missing all of the trim, which is something that I'm on the lookout for and will be a part of the restoration process. So given the inadequate lighting, I'm trying to show you the taillight. This was also a new design for 72. It is a wraparound style light, as you can see by the housing. And this was done probably as another cost-effective way, given that Dodge was more or less considered the poor man's vehicle, as a way to not have to spend money on designing a completely separate side reflector. It was all a part of the same piece. Notice how the reverse light is at the top of the housing, not at the bottom. Reading somewhere in a sales brochure that this was done to prevent any type of accident from the reverse light, say in a loading zone or shipping yard or during loading. Go ahead and move on to the other side now. They didn't make a whole lot of these trucks. Even though it was marketed as the only all-new 72 truck that you were going to see, they did not make a whole lot, and from what I can gather, the numbers are somewhere around 23,000 for the 72 model year. Now keep in mind, with the options that this has, and with how many are probably left out there, there is probably not another one like this. Go ahead and move on to the interior. So, talking a little bit more about the Adventurer SE package. When you got the SE package, you got the deluxe door panels. It has the integrated armrest, the chrome trim, as well as the lower map pocket in the door, and a smaller, tinier Adventurer SE badge with a wood grain insert. Now this same wood grain was also found on the dash, around the gauge cluster, as well as this lower piece of trim that rides just underneath the vents. The wood grain was also on the wide body mold side trim, as far as I can see, between 72 and 74, 75. And it changed slightly, and they didn't end up having the same trim. The trim on this truck would have actually rode the body line on both sides, whereas later years they decided to make it simpler, and instead of having this many different pieces that made up the trim, they decided to just follow the rocker panel line. So this truck did come with 2 gas tanks. I do not have, unfortunately, the second gas tank as it was plastic. One interesting thing to note about it, though, is that it actually rides inside of the frame rail. I understand that this was a time in which most of those gas tanks for the other competitors rode outside and posed a serious or somewhat serious, depending on the crash, if the vehicle was T-boned. Being that said, though, it only has the one, and the auxiliary tank was actually fed by the same filler neck. Coincidentally, there was a little operated door that when you pulled the switch, it would open to allow the fuel to go into the tank rather than the main tank behind the seat. So, this has a pretty unusual color combination with the orange and white exterior and the saddle color interior. I actually really think it looks pretty sharp. And when I first got the truck, it was heavily gutted and there wasn't a whole lot to it. I did have the door panels and the seats. Another thing to note about the seats, just talking a little bit about them, these are Dodge Buddy buckets. As far as I can see, the seat frame itself that the seats reside on is original, but the material as well as the foams are not. And the Buddy buckets was these two low back bucket seats. You have the center fold down armrest and a storage compartment underneath here. So I got all my towels and whatnot in there. It's a 2-spoke steering wheel. They had this wheel for a number of years, and one thing to note about it is that everything that I've seen as far as the advertisements and commercials for the SE, the Custom, and the Base Adventurer all used this wheel. And this is a full width horn pad. There was a base model horn that was not taking up the full width and didn't have any type of accent line in it whatsoever. It was a central piece, and I was missing it when I first got the truck. How I knew to get this one and not the other is because the horn bracket is completely different. This one has 2 prongs to accept the 2 screws that hold it to the base of the wheel. As far as interior goes, the camper package also got you a physical oil pressure gauge rather than just the idiot light, 100 mile/hour speedometer, which is more than generous for this truck. I will not be doing 100 in it, given the Dana 60 and the transmission that's in it is heavy duty. Doesn't allow me to do anything in 4th gear whatsoever higher than 55 without screaming. AM radio. Another very rare option that this truck came with was factory air conditioning. The compressor and most of the components are there. The blower motor works and the heat works, but I'm missing some of the central other, say, hoses or valves that would operate the AC. An R12 is really expensive and hard enough as is to find. Don't want to spend money on that if it doesn't work. Therefore, you got the AC vents as well. And to talk a little bit about the transmission, this is the new Process 445, which is a heavy-duty 4-speed. And a very rare option. One interesting thing to note about it even being in here with the Adventure SE package is a little odd. I did read a brochure from back in the day that offered a free automatic transmission if you so as pleaded to get with a certain trim package or buy a camper towing package. They threw in a free automatic. So to see it with a 4-speed with the highest trim level that they offered at the time was a little unusual. Another thing to note is the pedals. So I'd just like you to take a moment and think to yourself, when was the last time, if ever, you had seen a 72 Dodge truck that was a 4-speed with the chrome in the pedals? When I got it, it was all there except for the clutch pedal chrome. I met with a gentleman in North Dakota, of all places. I'm out here in AZ, and he had one. He'd only ever seen one, and he was kind enough to sell it to me. So I have never seen another 72 Dodge Adventurer SE with a 4-speed. I'll go ahead and move around to the other side now. And then we'll go underneath the engine. Get out my key. Here's the key with the Chrysler Pentastar logo. I'm also missing if you didn't notice already, I'm missing the little Pentastar badge that would have been on that lower passenger side fender. So I'll have to get that during the restoration after I repaint the truck. Interesting thing to note about this door is for 72, it was a brand new option that, and this was something that was featured in the commercial and the sales training video, to offer to the customer that they had a brand new passenger side door lock. It only works for the passenger side, not the driver. That if you decide to close the door and push it down before so, will this side actually lock itself? If you do it with the driver, it doesn't work. You have to use the key. So kind of a weird little piece that they offer, but it was the latest and greatest in terms of safety that Dodge had to offer. Again, another shot of the passenger side door panel. I haven't seen any reproductions of these, and when I got the truck, it was all here. There's a couple chips and weathered areas in it, but for the most part, everything was there. Very well preserved. I have not seen another one, and if I do, they come up online for OfferUp or Facebook Marketplace or even eBay, and they are just in not good condition whatsoever. So it's very fortunate to have that. Go ahead and looking at the glove box. I did have the dash redone and reshot, as well as there were some cracks in the glove box door that I had redone and filled in. That vinyl material in that day was not good and not UV protectant whatsoever. So the heat would eat away at it, especially being that this is, to my knowledge, an AZ truck all of its life. So opening this up, it almost doubles as a shelf. And it really is just two pieces. It's a central plastic piece that covers the gauges, and then this padded dash piece that is the glove box door. A very large and hefty weight to it as well if you happen to take it off of those 4 screws that hold it. Inside the glove box, I do have the original owner's manual. That's just about all in terms I have of documentation. And it also came with a glove box light. I was missing the lens, found only one truck in the local junkyard that seemed to have it, and popped the lens in there and got the light to work. So all of that does work. Talk a little bit about the fuse box. This was brand new for 72. It was an easy access fuse panel, whereas the Fords and Chevys were up underneath the dash. This one was just opening the glove box. Unfortunately, the heater core has been bypassed, probably some type of failure in the past regarding the electrical system. I have seen a number of other trucks that seem to have the same issue, where the area where the fuse would have gone for the heater and AC has been bypassed, and it happens to be this way in this truck as well. So if you happen to have a heavy-duty fuse box and you'd like to sell it, please let me know or message me in the comments, and we can exchange contact information. So go ahead and close the glove box door. A shot of the interior. Has cream-colored sun visors, which is interesting. I believe that if these are, say, the original style of seats that were ordered with this truck, the Buddy Buckets, that they most likely would have been the same cream-colored material as the sun visors. So go ahead and close the door. And one final thing to note about the exterior of the vehicle is that with the camper package, you got the sliding rear glass window, and it also has a unique option of the cargo light. And all it was just a little 2-bulb light that shined down into the bed to help you see better if you decided to take on the risk of loading things at night. I'll go ahead and move around to the other side, as well as open the engine bay. Give me one sec, I gotta set the phone down. So I'll go ahead and I'll show you the cargo light, and then we'll move on to the engine. And then I will start it up and let you hear it. The cargo light. There's a little warning sticker that's right underneath the speedometer that says, "Warning, do not drive with cargo light on." And if you do, for some reason, it grounds out the lights and it blows the lights. Don't ask me how I know that. The light comes on, lets you know that it's on. And it does shine fairly bright. It's nighttime right now, and it shines a great deal into the bed. So that was not working when I first got the truck. I did get it to working condition, so I'm happy about that. Just every little piece to the puzzle that I find gives me a little bit more encouragement to keep going until the point where I can take the vehicle apart and have everything redone on it, as is a pretty unique truck. So this is the motor. I understand the limited amount of light that I have. This is a 360 cubic inch V8, a part of the Chrysler LA series of engines. Now, the biggest motor you could get in 1972 was a 400, but surprisingly, if you read within the original owner's manual, the air compression ratio on the 360 was the highest out of any of the motors offered. This has an air-fuel ratio of 8.7 to 1. The big block 400 had a 8.2 to 1 compression ratio. I did replace the alternator. I had a failing alternator that left me stranded on the road, so that had to go and be replaced, but it is correct in the sense that it is the dual groove pulley to accept for the air conditioning compressor, excuse me. Funny thing about the air compressor is that it is a housing which does hold two small little pistons, almost kind of like a V-configured engine, which compresses and sends the refrigerant through the lines. This truck does have power brakes as well as power steering, and it runs extremely well. I did have to do some carburetor work. It is a 2-barrel. They did not offer a 4-barrel. Even for the 400, it was only a 2-barrel. I will talk just a little bit about how you can tell a 72 as far as I've seen. It's a little hard to see, so bear with me. But if you look down at the end of the firewall, you can see this small 7-shaped bracket that houses a small little rubber bump stop. And as far as I've seen, only for 72 did they do this as a little bumper for the hood. All other years it was a physical piece of the top of the cowl in the metal that stuck out just a little bit further than usual and accepted where the rubber was now up in the hood. So when I first got the truck, I was missing that and ended up finding it on later and installing it and putting it on. As far as documentation goes for this truck, it was not like other Mopars of the era where there was a metal fender tag somewhere in here. Nope, for 1972, it was a sticker that existed right here, a 2-piece sticker with the main sticker being held on and then a clear plastic one right over it to try to keep it. But with 50 plus years going on of heating up and cooling down with the engine running, it deteriorates and it falls off. But this is the sticker that would have housed where all of the codes were. So being that this one is missing, and when it was missing long before I owned the vehicle, I don't have any way to know exactly what it came with. A lot of this is just speculation or trying to figure out and find other vehicles that may have had similar options. So I'll go ahead and start it up now. This does have long tube headers that go to single Super 10 Flowmaster mufflers on both sides, and the exhaust dumps out the sides of the bed on both sides. I do have the original cast iron exhaust manifolds, as though were included in the purchase of the vehicle, and at some point in the future I will be probably just sandblasting them to get all the rust and oxidation off of it and putting them back on with dual exhaust that just goes and dumps out right behind the back tire. The exhaust is good. It allows the engine to breathe, but I'm just not a fan of the side exit style, so at some point that will be changed. Go ahead and start it. It fires right off. I did have some issues in the past with points, but I got myself a dwell meter and figured out how to gap points. And now it fires right off immediately almost every single time. You Mopar guys out there will like the sound of the starter. And also I got the radio to work as well. Let's turn the auxiliary on. So when I got the truck, the radio wasn't on. It wasn't even there, it was missing. But luckily whoever owned it prior did not decide to cut the dash and put in some aftermarket unit that took up more space. So the dash bezel was preserved. All right, enough talking. Let's go ahead and start it up. All of the gauges work. I have gotten all of them to work. I had an issue for a little while with the temperature gauge. It was kind of intermediate and would come on and off after hitting a bump. Go ahead and turn the lights on as well. Close the door. So all the lights in the dash work, and then even the light that's in the ashtray works. So that is just as brief of an overview as I can, while also trying to talk just a little bit about the history of the model and what kind of makes this truck in particular significant in that regard. So I wanted to thank you again for go ahead and taking some time out of your evening to watch the video, and if you made it this far, I greatly appreciate you very much. Thank you so much for watching. If I maybe get requests in the future or other questions and comments, I'll go ahead and try to answer them as best as I can. And other than that, that's really about it. Thank you so much. Take care.